Tune in Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for episode 31 of Politically Conscious. Governor Gavin Newsom says Trump overstepped by deploying the National Guard and Marines to support LAPD. But is it a constitutional crisis or Trump simply keeping his campaign promise on immigration and border control? We ask our political experts where they think African Americans should stand on this issue. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. What's up, everybody? It's your mental activist, Montoya Smith. Welcome to episode 31 of Politically Conscious. Got my brother Emil Bryan in here today it's supposed to be from the left side, but I'm going to ask him to kind of aim it down the middle today because unfortunately for some of the watchers out there, some of the viewers that were looking to hear what Shelley had to say about this issue, unfortunately, my brother couldn't be with us again today. So we're going to rock out. The show must go on. And so hopefully we can do what we do, which is look at political cuts from around the internet and basically try to weed out the propaganda that you get from them. And so if you will, Emil, we're discussing the ICE protest, the ICE raids today. Give them a very quick background. Let's shorten it up. I'm going to get into Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. I want to play a cut. I was going to open the show with that, but I did want to announce for those who had asked me about Shelley being on the show today. Just wanted to highlight, unfortunately, we didn't get that brother today. So if you'll give a quick background, I'm going to go ahead and play this from Gavin Newsom to kind of start the show and have you react to the governor's response to Trump sending the National Guard to California in lieu of these ICE protests. Tell them who you are, brother.
Emil Bryan, I'm a political consultant, author, speaker, and my job is to, when I advise my clients, my candidates, that they should always tell the truth. The reason why I ask them to tell the truth is because the people can handle it and they have information with which they can make great decisions. We try to do that here. Big up to Shelley. Hope to see you on next one. I'll do my best to hold it down, brother. But always tell the truth, candidates. You can handle the truth. Our people can do it.
I don't know if they can do it, man. You keep saying it every show. I'm scared they can't. But it's all good. Let's get this cut from Gavin. I'm going to just play part of what he had to say.
I want to say a few words about the events of the last few days. This past weekend, federal agents conducted large-scale workplace raids in and around Los Angeles. Those raids continue as I speak. California is no stranger to immigration enforcement, but instead of focusing on undocumented immigrants with serious criminal records and people with final deportation orders, a strategy both parties have long supported, this administration is pushing mass deportations, indiscriminately targeting hardworking immigrant families, regardless of their roots or risk. What's happening right now is very different than anything we've seen before. On Saturday morning, when federal agents jumped out of an unmarked van near a Home Depot parking lot, they began grabbing people, a deliberate targeting of a heavily Latino suburb. A similar scene played out when a clothing company was raided downtown. In other actions, a U.S. citizen, 9 months pregnant, was arrested. A 4-year-old girl taken. Families separated, friends quite literally disappearing. In response, everyday Angelenos came out to exercise their constitutional right to free speech and assembly, to protest their government's actions. In turn, the state of California and the city and county of Los Angeles sent our police officers to help keep the peace. And with some exceptions, they were successful. Like many states, California is no stranger to this sort of unrest. We manage it regularly and with our own law enforcement. But this, again, was different. What then ensued was the use of tear gas, flashbang grenades, rubber bullets, federal agents detaining people and undermining their due process rights. Donald Trump, without consulting California law enforcement leaders, commandeered 2,000 of our state's National Guard members to deploy on our streets, illegally and for no reason. This brazen abuse of power by a sitting president inflamed a combustible situation, putting our people, our officers, and even our National Guard at risk. That's when the downward spiral began. He doubled down on his dangerous National Guard deployment by fanning the flames even harder. And the president, he did it on purpose. As the news spread throughout LA, anxiety for family and friends ramped up. Protest.
Emil, I'm gonna challenge you to pull the spin out of Governor Gavin Newsom's speech in reference to what happened. So pull the spin out of it, because that's what we do. Get the spin out. Tell me what the spin is.
Okay, so first and foremost, everybody knows that ICE is under orders to move out as many people as possible. So ICE has this mandate to to deport every illegal immigrant they can find. So they're going to go to places that are likely to host them. At first, the president's stated policy was to get criminals, people who already had records, people who were already working within the system, perhaps illegally, or outside the system, perhaps illegally, right? So there was that group of people, but that group proved to be smaller and easier to find than initially thought. So there was a mandate to increase the numbers per day, which is where some of these raids come from. So what Governor Newsom is talking about is that there is a mandate that ICE is carrying out to remove people who are here illegally. The process we've talked about in other shows, due process and all those things, those are different conversations. I'm not saying they're not relevant, but in his remarks, they're not relevant in this context. Why this is important is because when the Angelenos came out to protest ICE doing the things they were protesting what they believed were draconian actions. So now you have the president's team, right, ICE doing its thing, and then you have Gavin Newsom saying at everyday Angelenos who were not innocent in this way, because although they were most of them, 95, 98% of them protesting nonviolently, were also surrounded or intermixed with them were people who were actually violent, who were doing things that were physically impeding ICE, who were physically starting problems for ICE, who were physically assaulting ICE and ICE vehicles. Now, whether you agree or disagree with those attacks on ICE to impede their progress, the fact is there was violence, and that violence needed a response. Governor Newsom did not necessarily respond vigorously with the LAPD and the California Highway Patrol and other police forces at his disposal, along with Mayor Bass. So now you have him telling you one part of the story, which is true-ish, that there was mostly nonviolent. But the other part is that if ICE couldn't do it and the LAPD and other police forces couldn't protect them, then the president had to federalize the National Guard. I do not necessarily agree with that, because that was not necessarily the extent to which I saw things. However, what Governor Newsom is doing is making sure he produces the problem. He says the words inflamed and already combustible situation. And the problem is, how did it get to be combustible? It's a combination of a lack of response from the California forces and an over response by ICE. And that was the combustible situation. I don't know what the answer was. I don't know if Mayor Bass and Governor Newsom were acting appropriately, but I do know that it was definitely a combustible situation produced by both sides, not necessarily seeing eye to eye. In other words, had the federal government and the state of California agreed that these things would happen and that ICE would be protected as they did these things, then we probably could see the temperature come down. But there was no agreement. There was only force and then a response to that force. And that response was, I will say, lethargic and probably not necessarily exactly what the federal government wanted to see. And that's why you see the conversation that you're seeing out of Governor Newsom. Again,
let me add to that, brother.
There's a lot to unpack in that. But
yeah. You broke it down beautifully. Let me jump in, brother. Let me jump in. Let me jump in. So the why I would add for the politics of it, Gavin Newsom is absolutely considering a presidential run, from what I can tell, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
He hasn't said it, but he's saying it.
Right. So again, if we're going to tell you about the spin, I want to get into the politics of it. So him appearing to present this, to highlight and say that President Trump sent these troops basically without their agreement between him and himself is definitely part of I want to be the antithesis to what we have now. And he's setting himself up for the presidential run to the extent that and you can probably give better details than I can. I'm not going to show a video of this, but at one point where he was willing to be arrested in reference to going against what Trump was doing inside of California. And I will tell anybody out there watching, and this is just, again, talking about the spin specifically, not the actual issue itself, but all of that is absolutely posturing for a political position. And I would offer, if it were someone else who did not have presidential aspirations, I think the rhetoric would be completely different, because they're going to highlight some actual laws in California that most people probably are not aware about, or not aware about, that leads to, in a sense, why the troops were sent. It wasn't just simply, and again, this is not me defending the president. There is a law, and we'll talk about it here briefly, so stay tuned. But that breaks down, in a sense, why they were sent. Now, should the government and the president absolutely be in accord and talking to each other and agreeing on something? That is absolutely how it should happen. So I'm not acting like what President Trump was done was A-okay, but there are some legal reasons for why it was done versus based on a specific rule in California and some other states. We're going to share that with you in a minute, but I'm just highlighting that the language that he's using is all more so posturing, right? More so posturing than it is actual fact. And so I will say to anyone out here who's getting this information from one side or the other, best believe that both sides are spinning it based on you as the constituent versus just telling you what's actually happening. Do you agree or disagree with anything I had to say in reference to the Gavin Newsom?
I'm going to disagree with you, but more on principle than on fact. And the reason why I would disagree with you is because when Tom Homan, the administration's border czar, threatened to arrest him, that was an unprecedented escalation between the federal government and the state of California. And that needed a response. And I don't think it should have been any. Now, him appearing, and I'm going to use the word macho, bring it and all the kind of, that was absolutely spin. What should have been, in a more measured tone, should have been, I reject the concept of you thinking that it's okay to arrest the governor simply because we disagree on policy or how policy is executed. But he didn't do that. He did the tough guy thing. Come on, bring it. You're a tough guy. Let's get it over with. That was absolutely spin. So I'm disagreeing with you in the sense that there should have been a response and it should have been robust, but I'm absolutely agreeing with you that the way he did that response, especially in that specific instance, was absolutely positioned to posture. And I'll say it this way too, because you brought it up. Him doing the address with the flags behind him, that was absolutely presidential, if you will, right? So if he was at a press conference, in a windbreaker and was just speaking facts to the people, I would say, okay, that is a proper response to the situation, ongoing crisis. But he got himself dressed up, gussied up in front of the flags. I said, okay, that's the spin. The response and the way the response was done, two different things. And I want to make sure I'm very clear. He should have responded, but how he responded was absolutely what you said.
And if he had got arrested, which he would have loved to have gotten arrested, for him, he feels like it would have guaranteed him to be our next president. Like that position would be something they would play up for the rest of his political career.
He certainly would have. He would have made it very, very easily to the Democratic nominee, or at least the leading candidate for Democratic nominee in 2028. But I think President Trump wisely did not take that bait because, everybody plays into President Trump's hands when he does his politics, but he's also savvy enough to recognize when the game's being played on him, and he de-escalated that threat. In fact, if you go back and look at Tom Homan, he's even saying, I didn't say that, when they got him on tape saying he did. So yeah, there was a de-escalation very intentionally because there was that potential.
Right. So yeah, he saw that spin and that angle and quickly de-escalated, despite, like you said, inappropriately from your perspective, and I respect this, it was an inappropriate threat from what I understand you to say.
Absolutely.
If I'm hearing you clearly, and I'm not disagreeing with that, but I am, again, we're here to talk about the spin part of it, if you will.
I mean, quickly from history,
okay.
President LBJ, President Kennedy didn't threaten to arrest the governors when they federalized the troops to protect the civil rights era, the people who were integrating schools. So if it wasn't as serious then, it ain't that serious now. So that threat probably was empty, but it shouldn't have been made in the first place.
All right, and thank you for that historical context. All right, let's weed through this thing, as again, we're talking about this ICE all throughout this show.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more, by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before, by cracking down on illegal hiring, by barring welfare benefits to illegal aliens. In the budget I will present to you, we will try to do more to speed the deportation of illegal aliens who are arrested for crimes, to better identify illegal aliens in the workplace, as recommended by the commission headed by former Congresswoman Barbara Jordan. We are a nation of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws. It is wrong and ultimately self-defeating for a nation of immigrants to permit the kind of abuse of our immigration laws we have seen in recent years, and we must do more to stop it.
Standing ovation when Clinton said it. What's the difference?
That was 30 years ago, first and foremost. Second, let's go back in time to 1986 when President Reagan signed a law that granted amnesty to almost everybody who was here illegally so that they could reset the clock. Fast forward 10 years from there, in 1996, President Clinton signs an immigration reform bill that sets up the apparatus for the kind of deportations we're seeing today and have seen since. He was 100% right in the context of his time to address those issues, because after that 10 years, after the amnesty law was passed, immigration was still a mess and it needed to be reformed. The problem was, as it is today, illegal immigrants are the scapegoats for every politician on either side of the aisle to make a point that they're strong on X, whatever X is, whether it's jobs, immigration, law and order, crime,
black on black crime.
Right. They always do this, right? And so Clinton in that time, in that era, was addressing a problem that was left over from the 1986 immigration law that granted amnesty. The problem today is that law has not changed. It is still hamstringing immigration efforts today, or empowering them, depending on your perspective. The comprehensive immigration reform bill that President Trump, when he was a candidate, said do not pass to the Republicans, and they listened to him, would have overhauled that 1996 bill. It was actually stronger and would have made more sense. People don't understand, and I'll always say this, the Democrats are not for open borders. That's a political positioning point offered by the Republicans. They want a controlled immigration process. They just want it looser so more people can come across the border legally because of those jobs that President Clinton was talking about. And the other side of this is, and you can go back 30 years or more, you will see a very lethargic enforcement of employment law. The problem is still going to be that the people coming across the border legally and illegally are filling positions that people are paying them to fill. So if you want to stop that, nobody's bill addresses robust enforcement on the employer side of the equation. And that's part of the problem that President Clinton didn't address, that all the presidents since then didn't address, and that even today is not being addressed. And that's one of the reasons why when you hear that standing ovation, there's this little blip in there you hear in that clip you had. It talked about illegal immigrants taking jobs that legal immigrants and others would take. And the answer to that is no, they're not taking those jobs, but that sounds good. And it's always been a spin from in perpetuity. Those jobs are not being taken by illegal immigrants because Americans don't want to work for that low pay on those terrible jobs. And the immigrants do, both legal and illegal.
So in all reality, regardless of which side is using it, the spin is not only real, right? I think that's what I'm hearing you say.
100%.
Not only is it real, but you're highlighting that because it resonates for us as the people and as the potential voter, they continue to use those talking points that doesn't change. For example, what you just talked about, the fact that we are not looking or wanting to take those jobs. Period, point blank, especially when we think about who immigration is focused on. Because when we get into, as we did on an earlier show, we had the funny back and forth between, was it Elon Musk and Ramsey? I think I might be saying his name wrong, whatever, when they were talking about, yeah, we need to bring in these highly talented immigrants to fill these tech jobs. You know what I mean? So,
yep.
So in that situation, they were kind of like, well, no, we don't want that happening, right? And so the reality is, and your point is, demand is actually the biggest mover, regardless of what the demand for those positions, whereas it's demand for the positions that we as Americans no longer want to fill. You know what I mean? Those low-paying jobs that we don't want to fill, or the demand is on the opposite end, right? Where we've talked about this. I know I have on the Mental Dialogue Talk Show, where we don't actually have enough Americans to fill some of the highest tech positions based on capacity, ability, and withdrawal, right? Like I'm talking about just the reality of having enough Americans. And so when that demand is high, America says, well, hey, India, send me your smartest people. China, send me your smartest people, because right now we don't have enough Americans based on our education system to fill these positions, right? And so I'm just kind of highlighting that the demand determines who comes in, whether it's legal or illegal or on the back of a B-1B visa. I'm saying it right, Emil?
H-1B.
H-1B. I always get it wrong. H-1B visa. And it's like, if we're very honest about it, they're bullshitting us. And I shouldn't be cursing on this show, YouTube, but that's what it is.
No, it's 100% crap. And I wish we as voters were more savvy about these nuances, because the rhetoric is easy for us to jump onto when we say, oh, immigrants bad or immigrants okay. They fill all these jobs. First of all, let's go back to automation. If Eli Whitney could invent the cotton gin in 1820 or whenever he did it, we could bring some automation forward that would allow some of these backbreaking jobs to be automated, which they should have been decades ago, if not a century ago. So first and foremost, we're not using technology wisely to solve these problems. Second, we're using low paid, low skill, and I don't even consider the work that they do low skill, but it's considered low skill by the Department of Labor. But these low wage, low skill jobs allow people to make enough money to send home, which is a foreign policy maneuver we love. We love being able to know that millions of people are sending billions of dollars back home, because it's a control mechanism. We let more people in, more people can send money home. It's a way we can very indirectly establish soft power. There's more to this question, and it's so nuanced, and we're falling for the big bites, the big bait, the big words. Illegal's bad, send them home. Illegal's good, keep them here. Instead of the nuances of what's really happening underneath all of this, because we like cheap strawberries.
Hey, dope. Let me play this next cut. We got some comments here too. So let me get some of these comments in, because we know make sure we keep to our comments. Kenny77 says Shelly is running. He can't spin this one. Let me see. I got another one from a friend, Scott.
Shelly don't run. I know Shelly. He don't run.
Nah, he definitely don't run. Nah, that ain't it. But that was a good take. Hey, for the watcher, that's definitely a good. I like it though. Good thought. It's a good thought. We got Scott Waters says Obama deported a lot as well. Yeah, actually, until to his point, to Scott's point, until this recent run of mass deportations that we've just had, Obama had deported more than anyone. And then recently, Trump daily is deporting more than Obama here just recently with what he's done before. But Obama definitely deported more than anyone. Let's see what else he says. He says, what's the view on how the courts are reacting now versus in the past? That's a good question. Let me see what your take on it. Let me get the question. Let me be clear for you.
And
hey, go ahead.
Scott, thanks for the questions and the commentary. I really appreciate it. The court's view is doing it's not the problem. It's how it's being done that's the problem. The courts want to continue to see due process unfold properly. And I think that's what's everybody's concerned about is, are you doing it in the way that the law prescribes? If you're not, then something's wrong. And the courts are being very clear that we don't care if you do this, how fast you do it. We care that you follow the law doing it. And the courts have been pretty consistent across all the different circuits. And and I'm pretty sure even up to the Supreme Court that you're seeing a very consistent approach, follow the law and do it vigorously. That's not the problem, but not following the law is.
Got you. And he went on to say, he says, also the discussion is headed towards jobs. He says, thought we were addressing the portion of illegal entries. We definitely going to discussing that. Just to give a clarity, great thought. I was just highlighting that, in my opinion, the demand for jobs is actually what actually is how immigration plays out in reality in our country, despite the political rhetoric. So I was just highlighting that the demand for jobs really is the rule of the day, despite what our politicians may be telling us. And I think Emil agreed with that. So that's kind of why I even mentioned the jobs, because that's really where you can see, or in my opinion, regardless of which party is in the lead, if you will, or running the country, that really whatever the need for jobs is what is really going to play a part in how strong or lax our policies are at any given time, in my opinion.
You know, if you remember back in the day, President Clinton, when he was running for president, he said it's the economy, stupid. And yep. That was something he was famous for reminding himself and reminding us. And it's the same for immigration. You can watch immigration wax and wane depending on the state of the economy. It's never going away. Even when the economy was bad, there were still people crossing the border legally and illegally during COVID-19 when everything was shut down. But what you're seeing is there's a direct correlation between jobs or the state of the economy and immigration, legal and illegal. So what we want to focus on is the things that are drawing people in. Of course, our way of life and the fact that they're coming from countries that may be oppressing them or oppression in general. But really, when you kind of boil it down, in my opinion, if you can understand the jobs angle, you pretty much understand the immigration angle.
And it keeps you from getting spin is why I brought it up. You know, again, that's kind of the thought. But let's go more into what we should, like I say, what we're actually talking about.
Promised 4 years ago at the Republican convention, I'm going to restore law and order.
And I have,
country.
except in Democrat-run cities. Look, we have laws. We have to go by the laws. We can't move in the National Guard. I can call insurrection, but there's no reason to ever do that, even in a Portland case. We can't call in the National Guard unless we're requested by a governor.
So that is being played on social media, saying when he was, going into the presidency the first time, hey, I wouldn't do these things. And then right now, with the situation in California, is he's sitting in. So they're kind of putting it on social media as if it's a contradiction. What I understand, and I asked you to look this up, Emil, so I'll have you kind of go into this explanation right now, because I didn't look it up. I just kind of got the basics. But California, along with some other states, have a law in reference to, and this is how I'll tell my little understanding, you can get more details, but the way I understand it is ICE as a federal agency, right? That, as you pointed out at the very beginning of this show, their mandate is to find people who are here illegally and deport them back. That's kind of always been their mandate prior to all the stuff we're seeing now, just to kind of give a basic. And so some states have, I forgot the name of the original act, but California calls theirs, what's the name of the one for California? It's slipping my mind right now.
The California Values Act?
Yeah, there's another state that originated. California just changed theirs to that name. But most states use the other name. It just won't come to my mind right now. But anyway, some states basically highlighted that they will not allow their police force to be involved in assisting the federal government with that job of finding and deporting those who are here illegally, as long as there is no crime being committed. So I'm just giving a context and a perspective. So in general, when ICE shows up anywhere, obviously we're talking about California right now, but when they show up and they're saying testing, say, hey, are you here illegally? Because of the way our laws are written, they've came across the border illegally, but that process is a federal process and is not considered criminal. So therefore, the police cannot assist. And so basically what happened, because the mandate did, they did say, hey, now go show up at the Home Depots, which hadn't been normal, right? To your point, like you said, early on, they realized, and I always knew this, it ain't never been as many criminals as they want to use for political purposes, right? Like I knew that was a joke. That's all politics. But now, in order to ramp the numbers up, you would now have to go out the actual workers. So that's what's happened, right? That's the reality of what's happening. No political spin on what I'm explaining to you. I'm just speaking facts. So to your point, Emil, since there wasn't as many criminals, the mandate says, hey, let's show up where they're always. And as we all know, I've used them to help me move and all this type of stuff. You go to Home Depot and you find people who are making a living, in that manner. But anyway, he says, hey, I show up and do that. So they're able to do that. When it started happening and it surprised those in California, the neighborhood says, hey, we want to protest what ICE is doing. On a federal level, it's still a civil action because protesting, once again, is allowed by our Constitution, and some of the people that are protesting are actual citizens. So even more of the reason that at this point it is strictly a civil action, and at that point, California, based on their rule, will not get involved in any of that unless something turns violent. And from what I understand, the protests, I didn't watch all this on the news, but when the protests turn violent, that's when the LAPD can, in a sense, jump in. And from what I understand, the LAPD chief said we're overwhelmed. And so because of that California Valuation Act, you can explain it better than I can, Emil, and I'll shut up and let you go into the details. But in a sense, that's how the troops legally got brought to California. Again, this is not me defending anything. This is just me understand the way I understand the laws. At that point, he was able to bring more people, which was the National Guard, because the LAPD was overwhelmed. And I hope I explained that correctly, but Emil, get in there and give me the details better, if not.
Excuse me. So one of the things is the California Values Act is very clear about the use of state resources, let's say law enforcement, to help the federal immigration and customs enforcement process or agencies, right? And what they said is, unless it's tied to another crime or felony, it's very clear. And for those who want to read it, you can go to the California legislature and look up. The name is the California Values Act. And section 7284 is the one that you really want to read if you're going to read through any of it. And in that, the focus is on if someone has a crime, especially a felony, they're already in prison, then they can help ICE. Otherwise, it's hands off until there's some reason to go forward. Now that we know that in the act, the question is, does LAPD or does the LA County Sheriff's Department or California Highway Patrol need help? Well, that's the governor and the mayor's call. The mayor says to the governor, I need help. He brings other state resources to bear. If they're overwhelmed, then he can call the National Guard, and that's the state's responsibility. And then if that doesn't work, he can ask for more help, and that's when he goes to the president and say, hey, I don't have enough help. When you bypass those levels of escalation, you're missing something. LAPD at one point said, we're not overwhelmed. In fact, it's kind of funny that one of the most maligned police departments for their use of excessive force says, we don't need help. We're good. And condemn the federalization of the National Guard.
Let me ask you, sorry to cut you. So I just received information that they once mentioned they were overwhelmed. I'm asking just to understand because I didn't look that up for myself. So where I heard that from, did they get that wrong, or is there a point in which they said they were overwhelmed, and you're saying they said they didn't? So I'm not saying who's right. I'm just saying, do you know about at one point them mentioning that they were overwhelmed? Do you know if that part was factual? Because I don't know. That's what's making me ask this question.
Right. So I'm going to go with about 12 hours ago, Newsweek published the LAPD chief saying things that are opposite of what you heard.
Okay, got you.
Very clearly, he was like, I don't need help right now. We got it. And the governor saying that, and the mayor of LA is saying that. So there's no need to escalate. President Trump injected them into the situation. He's injected the U.S. Marine Corps, which absolutely should not have happened, in my opinion.
That's the next place I was going. I don't know how to. Yeah, that's a clear cut above and beyond just breaking down the actual law of how it was allowed. If I'm hearing you clearly, there's just steps that he skipped, which would have been talking to the chief, talking to the mayor, talking to the governor. And so that's what they're saying. They're coming out unilaterally, if I'm hearing you correctly, saying, hey, we didn't ask for any of this. So that is also part of the process. But in a sense, with the National Guard, he didn't actually, quote unquote, break or go against the law. But I think I was going to ask you next, and you already said it, when you get to the Marines, we're clearly going above and beyond even what's allowed based on the California Valuation Act, if I'm hearing it correctly.
100%. So the California Values Act, again, 7284 is the relevant chapter or relevant section. And it's just very clear. It says immigrants are valuable. There's a relationship of trust between immigrants and the community and the state. And here's the part that really is important. Entangling state and local agencies with federal immigration enforcement programs diverts already limited resources and blurs the lines of accountability between local, state, and federal governments. They're making it very clear. ICE is an agent of the federal government. Immigration is a federal responsibility. We're not going to interfere nor assist because our resources, we admit, are limited. Now, there are other states that say we'll happily help if that's the case. And that's a state-by-state kind of prerogative, and that's okay. But California's made it very clear. That's not what we're doing. We value our immigrants. And one of the reasons why, just for people's kind of context, if an immigrant has another crime associated with them, and perhaps they're illegally in the country, and they have a crime, let's say they're robbed or harmed in some way, if they know the police are going to help deport them, they're not going to report that crime. So they want that crime reported so they can solve the crime problem. But if it's conflated with the immigration problem, there's a concern that they won't be able to address the actual crime. So California willing to defer on the immigration side of things in order to ensure they get the best possible control on crime. That's their state prerogative. And that's something that other states have said, nah, we're not doing that. We're going to do it this way. And California has a robust immigrant population. People clown them because they have a huge economy based on that. But the bottom line is, this is the state law. So injecting federalized National Guard troops into LA without their permission absolutely goes against what they said they need to do to be able to sustain California as a sovereign state.
I got you. Hey, I got a special guest in the back. I'm going to just give you a heads up. Brent, if you can hear me, I know you can hear me. I'm going to play one more cut. We're going to respond to that, and then we're going to bring our special guest on as well. I thought this was a cut to kind of call myself out. If you recall earlier in some of our shows, I was highlighting the vitriol that we show amongst each other when it comes to politics. And we always talk about our politically conscious. We want to raise your awareness, make sure we're giving you as much facts as possible. There's not as much propaganda as we say. Our motto is, if you listen to the propaganda, listen to us. But I remember in particularly honing in on one, in a sense, being better towards one another, even if we vote differently, right? Like I've had several conversations on the show about that. And so I highlighted that it's actually arrogant, in my opinion, to assume what someone else's interests are. And so you're not smart when you're saying to other people, hey, you're voting against your own interests, because at the end of the day, you don't know that person's background. And I was just recommending that people get away from always saying that, because we're acting like each other is stupid. And we get into that space instead of having the nuance political dialogue that we should be having, we start calling people stupid, making it more emotional, and now we get played by the politics when we're in that space. So I'm giving a big context because I feel like I'm about to play a cut. I don't know who the lady is that's speaking, but she says she owns this farm, and she highlights that this situation right now actually ended up being her reality is that she went against her interests by voting for Trump. And I just wanted to let you hear what she had to say. But I also was willing to call myself out and say, hey, I don't say we should say this, but in this situation, she's saying it about herself. And again, I don't know if this is a real video or not, but I thought it was worthy of looking at based on this current situation. So let me play this cut and just get your thoughts on it, Emil, and then we'll bring our special guest on. Hold on 1 second. Here we go.
Y'all saw the news out of Nebraska today. Apparently our entire state is going to go bankrupt in 2 quarters. Me and my husband owned a cattle ranch here, and I can confirm that all of the cattle ranchers here overwhelmingly voted for Trump. We support him. We voted for him. Something like 70% of our entire workforce is undocumented immigrants, and they straight up are not showing up for work anymore. They have all either fled the country, fled the state. They don't want to get raided while at work, so they have just moved on to work somewhere else. And straight up, we are going to go bankrupt now. We are going to go bankrupt. And yeah, we voted. We knew that the immigrants would get deported, and he was coming after immigrants. Yet we still voted for it. Overwhelmingly voted for our own demise. I was talking to my husband last night, and I have to admit that it seems a bit foolish now when you think about it like that we voted for something that is now putting us directly out of business.
So I always assume that there's an extreme when we see these videos, but I don't think that was presented by the news media. So in that sense, Emil, I would actually consider that a more real life situation because, again, she's talking about herself, and I didn't get that from a news media. When it's on the news, I'm always worried about the spin. You know what I mean? I'm just keeping it a bean, right? But but I'm highlighting in this situation from her personal standpoint, she is saying, hey, I made that mistake based on the industry that we're in. So I will say this. I'm not saying to other people when you're saying they're voting against their interests, I'm not saying there's never anyone who doesn't vote against their interests. I still kind of stand by, just to kind of make a side note, that you assuming that about someone else is relatively arrogant when it comes to their vote. But again, here's this woman saying, hey, it's kind of silly based on our situation. Any thoughts of hearing that woman say, hey, here's my reality, and I don't know if what I did was a smart decision? Any thoughts on that? I got one other thought.
I want to get to our special guest real quick, but I'll just say this, that if you look up some of the headlines coming out of Nebraska, what she's saying is pretty much valid and verified and verifiable. There's just been a lot of enforcement outside of California that has not gotten news. If you're paying attention, Iowa, Nebraska, all the farm states in the heartland of America, those are absolutely being hammered by ICE as well. But they're red states, so they're not getting the kind of press that you might expect from a California, a Texas, or a Florida. Even though those are red states, they're also big states. The smaller states, they're not getting the press. So she's absolutely seeing the effect of her vote in a way that she probably did not anticipate. And now that she's here, she's willing to admit that perhaps she made a mistake tactically or strategically voting for what was probably the tactical choice. And a whole lot of people are going to wonder, how are they going to make ends meet in those farm states? And the problem is that there's no good answer. Either you pay more and hope you attract the right people, or you turn your head and do what you've been doing, which is hope that some of the illegal immigrants continue to want to work for you, and they'll probably be asking for a little bit more money because of the danger.
Makes sense. Let me get to a couple of comments, and we'll bring our special guest on. I love this comment right here from my brother Ephraim. He says, everyone remember to like the stream. It helps the algorithm. I'm terrible at saying that, so thank you for that reminder. So everybody, please do that. Kenny77 says, I think it's based on the cut we just paid, says they voted based off of white xenophobia. That's the bottom line. They can twist it if they want, but there is no economic or national security reason to vote for Trump. That was his thought, in his opinion. Fair enough. All right. So I do want to move this conversation along because as we talk about immigration, this is always, in my opinion, a very twisted conversation for us as African Americans. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring my brother Brent House on. I didn't bring him on specifically for this, but I'll be willing to get his opinion on it. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring you in. Thank you, brother, for being with us.
Hey, it's good to see you. Nice to see you, Emil. I've listened to you and your comments over the period of time that you've been associated with Smitty on these shows, and I appreciate your opinions, man. I really like where you're coming from.
Nah, good stuff.
Welcome, brother. It's good to have you.
Nah, definitely good to have you. So, Brad, I didn't give you this warning, but I'm gonna go ahead and bring you into responding to these conversations, and then I'll tell people exactly why I brought you on. But let's go ahead and get your responses to these as well. Again, we're missing our brother Shelly Windows for anybody that may be looking for him, but we're gonna definitely look out for that brother and get him back on here in the future as well. Let me find this next cut. So again, I want to kind of move the conversation in this direction based on our community. How there's always this argument, I see it on social media all the time, how we as the African American community could or should be looking at this immigration situation. I'm going to share this one comment, then I'm going to play this cut from Ernest Krim highlighting what Malcolm X said about this situation years ago. But let me find this one comment from a friend of mine, and he was pretty he was pretty clear on his stance. And I'm not telling other people what their stance should be, but I wanted to look at it from all angles. So my brother Kalunji Changa, he's over Black Power Media. This is just a comment he said a few days ago in reference to these raids starting. He says, imperialists invade other people's homes, justify the domination, destruction, and death they cause, and then create. I'm gonna mute you real quick because I can hear that background right now. All right, y'all hear that? You hear that? It might not be.
Yeah, I can hear it.
I don't know what that is. All right, y'all, forgive us for the extra sounds. I don't know what it is. Let me start over. He says, imperialists invade other people's homes, justify the domination, destruction, and death that they cause, and then create immigration laws to evict non-white people from the land they stole, then get hostile when the people object. Shaking my head. Nothing is colder than the white man. So that's one perspective. Now let y'all hear what Malcolm X had to say again from this brother Ernest Krim, his IG page. This is where I got that from.
Y'all ain't gonna believe what Malcolm X said about Latinos and black people. We must realize that our problems are the same as those faced by people all over the world who are being oppressed by the same enemy. Whether it's the peasants in Latin America or the workers in Africa, we are all fighting against the same system of exploitation. And it gets worse than that, y'all. The problem facing the black man in America is the same as that facing the oppressed people all over the world. It is not a Negro problem, nor an American problem. It is a human problem. What's happening to us is happening to black people in Africa, brown people in Latin America, and yellow people in Asia. It's the same system. And if that wasn't bad enough, Brother Malcolm also said this: I believe that there will ultimately be a clash between the oppressed and those that do the oppressing. I believe that there will be a clash between those who want freedom, justice, and equality for everyone, and those who want to continue the systems of exploitation. I believe that there will be that kind of clash, but I don't think it will be based on the color of the skin. It will be between those who believe in human rights and those who believe in exploitation. This is what I think is coming in Latin America, in Africa, and right here in America. What does it mean to you that one of our most beloved historical figures, a man that we know without a shadow of a doubt loved his people more than anything, expressed solidarity with groups from other racial backgrounds because he understood the common humanity and the common threat that we all face? What does that mean for us in this important moment? And what does it mean for us moving forward? If you escape from prison, are you ever truly free?
He says, what does that mean? The words from Malcolm X, my hero, right? My hero. I've written about the black and brown relationship in my book, Re-Education of the Negro, just challenging how we see it. And I can say Malcolm as my hero, I think his assessment is correct. Maybe the time that he's talking about the clash is happening, maybe we're on the verge of it finally, possibly. So in saying that, I'm going to say, however, and then I'm going to throw it over to Emil and go to Brent as well. So I'm going to say, however, in saying that, the relationship between black and brown specifically, if we're assuming, we're going to refer to brown as Latinos in this situation. So the relationship between black and brown specifically has been so skewed and so divided that it can be very difficult, and I understand this, for African Americans to even listen to what Brother Malcolm is saying there. I'm talking about in current times. I don't know if it was as divided as it is now, because since that time, the situation we're talking about now, that Nebraska farmer lady was talking about. Now, she's a farmer. She's probably not, she didn't sound Latino in that situation, right? I'm making assumptions here. But there are absolutely, we saw that a large part of the Latino vote, male specifically, went through Trump. Now, again, Latinos are not monolithic. There are definitely different groups who want those that come from South America to come here in the legal means, because that's what they had to do. And so they're probably still advocating for what they're advocating for. I'm not making them one block vote. I just want to be real nuanced as I have this conversation. But I'm saying all this to say, but there are some that I've seen, just like that lady in Nebraska, say, hey, you promised us you wouldn't do what we're seeing now. You were only going after the criminals, right? So they were for that and say, we voted for you because you promised us you wouldn't go after what we're seeing now. That's for the Latinos that feel that way. So there are African Americans right now that says that same Latino didn't care about what we were concerned about, the stuff that's in Project 2025 that was very race baiting, that type of stuff. You didn't care about it. So you were divided in your vote by putting this man in, and quote unquote, now you want me to stand with you? Forget that. I respect all of those thoughts. I just wanted to put it out there, and I'll go to you, Emil.
So Brother Malcolm is astute and prescient as always. Rarely do I find his commentary to be off base. It's just a matter of the application. And here's the problem that we're seeing in the modern era. There is a wedge between the black and brown. It was not always a strong bond, but it was never as weak as we're seeing it, at least not in the modern era. I can go back and show you where at one point, Mexicans specifically out of the Latin population wanted to be white and were advocating for their position in America as white. But over the years, there's been more solidarity than difference between the two of us. Today, what you're seeing is, I think, a short-sighted look from Black people in America. It's not about whether or not the Latin population is going to be deported or stay here. It's about what is the apparatus going to do once that stuff is done. Like, we've always advocated for a proper use of force, because we've always been the recipients of the most force out of all the peoples who are not white in this country. So I'm just looking at it from the same position, as in, if you have all this apparatus, at some point it will probably turn toward us in a negative way. And we should be fighting for that, not necessarily for the immigrants, but for the apparatus that is about to always come toward us after it's dealt with the other people. So I'm not here to agree or disagree that we have a wedge. I'm here to just remind us that no matter what happens to the immigrants, all of those weapons and all of those bodies are going to need a disposition, and typically it comes here.
And so what I'll say, and I'm going to go to Brent, if you will, Brent, come off of mute because I want to get your thoughts on this as well. I will highlight, and again, I understand the position of, I'm sitting this out, from those who feel that way. I understand really all three positions, whether you're neutral, against what you're seeing happening, like Brother Kalungi is, right? Or literally saying, I don't care, based on how Latinos voted or how they've been to us in the past, whether it's on some street stuff or some political stuff, right? Like there's this wedge. The only thing that I'll say, and this is where, like yourself, Emil, I don't find Malcolm to be off, is with both sides of the black and brown, if you will, have fallen for however they try to divide us, right? I'm just talking about whatever has kept us divided. It's like both sides need to remember how intentional that part is. So the differences that we have now, we should be aware of where they came from. Like their real life experiences. Somebody doesn't want to deal with somebody because of a real life experience or even a racist experience for once somebody that's Latino or black, that type of thing. Like I get that those realities happening, they happen. And so that's why people say we should never come together or we can't come together. I'm just reminding them, like Malcolm, that there was an apparatus keeps us divided, and when it plays out, we neither side thinks above that. But it is hard to say, "Oh, now you're going through this. Now you want us to help us, if you will." And one last thing, and I'll go to Brent on this. And the last thing, here's one difference. We always talk about how all other groups have benefited from our civil rights, what our specifically black ancestors did to, in a sense, make America live out its actual words, live, and make the amendments and the changes. That is definitely off the backs of our community. Like we are very aware and know that history. So everyone else has benefited. Well, one of the things that MLK and them did when they protested, they also accepted the consequences. I don't see that being a part of the protest I'm seeing now, and I'm just calling it out for the way I see it. Brent, any thoughts on anything myself or Emil said, and we'll let people know why we actually brought you here after that.
Yeah, and thanks for that. And I'm driving, so you might be getting some of the
No, you good. You
background
sound
noise
good.
in
You're
there.
clear. You're
But you
clear. It
can hear
wasn't
me
you. It
okay?
wasn't even you. Yeah, it wasn't even you. We don't know what it was.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, and but a lot like what Emil says, and I've suggested this in our friend group. Sometimes we really need to look at what Reverend Barber is talking about in the Carolinas when he's picked up Martin Luther King's his campaign on help me
Oh, the
out,
Poor
Emil, if you
People's
know.
Campaign.
Poor People's Campaign. Thank you. And the Poor People's Campaign. And he's saying there is no wedge between us. There is no way. I mean, when the issues that are ours right now will be yours, brown people. The issues that are ours right now will be those in the Appalachian Mountains. My cousin Charles Booker ran against McConnell in Kentucky for senator in the last term, and he kept saying same thing about the wedge. From the hood to the hollow, we all have some of the same issues, and our constituency together is greater than all those that any other Democrat, Republican constituency out there. And we have to look. We can't say that that is not our issue, because at some point, as you've heard me say, the water's edge is going to reach your doorstep. Just because it's not there now, the flood is coming for you. And if we are not there to block it, know that you're next. And that's what we see with this immigration fight. Once they clear it out, once the conservatives feel that they've cleared all that problem out, there's somebody else they're going to be focused on. And right now, we need to recognize the challenges that other folks are having and be able to have the foresight to see how it's going to relate to our own interests as well.
No, thank y'all for your thoughts again. I respect.
And I think part of why you brought me up.
Yeah, I'm about to introduce that part. Yep. Yeah, I want to introduce that.
Go ahead.
Yep. So again,
okay.
However y'all feel is specifically how we should. I'm not telling. That's not even our goal to tell you how to think or how to feel. I still stand by. I understand all the angles. I do agree, Brent, that it would help if all groups understood that. But I also, unfortunately, understand that the divide is played out, in such a way that it makes it harder for people to accept that. I also want to give our, and I got one thought that crossed my mind yesterday. I just want to share it on the show is we don't even realize this, because I'm always giving our black ancestors specifically the props for them understanding how to be involved politically. And I think in my opinion, I think we less understand that in current times. And so actually, we don't even realize our black ancestors with their efforts, in how they protested and also was involved politically, got us to the stage that now in this situation, we have the luxury as African Americans to choose to be indifferent. I'm talking about, if you think about what I'm saying, it's the same indifference that MLK addressed for why it took so long for the progress to happen in America for our community, because his thing was not just the avid racers, it's the indifferent people who are doing nothing that are actually playing a bigger role in the progress of our community. And I'm just saying, from a perspective and context, even us having online battles of whether we should be involved, we don't even realize our ancestors got us to a stage where we could choose to be just as indifferent. I'm not even saying right or wrong. It's just a perspective.
It's a good perspective too, Montoya, because part of the challenge that we're facing today is that Black people are no longer monolithic either, right? We used to be very much in the Jim Crow oppression, and we had a sort of north, south, and west sort of lean. You know, if you were out west, you didn't feel it so much. If you were up north, you knew it was there, but it wasn't quite the sting. And then down south, it was pure pain. And we were all related to that down south perspective somehow, some way. Today, we have generations who have never even heard of Jim Crow, much less felt the sting of it. Our grandparents and grandparents don't talk about it. So that monolith is broken. And just like the Latin population is not a monolith because of its national origins, we're not a monolith. And so people are now articulating from those non-monolithic positions how they feel. And the problem is, unfortunately, for many of those people, they have not yet discovered what history has shown. And that's where Reverend Barber and others are trying to be very clear. You might not feel it today, but you are still a potential for oppression despite your socioeconomic status, despite your education, despite your gender. You are still a target according to how this government operates. And what we need to do is listen to history a little bit more clearly. And that's something that you've talked about many times.
Absolutely. And to your point, is why Mexicans came here lobbying to be white, because they understood they could one day be at that edge. So just a big roundabout thought on that. I brought you here, Brent. Thank you again for coming on, because at the end of the day, not only are we challenging your consciousness, for all of you who are watching, please share this show. Make sure you're liking the page and subscribing to the page. But we're doing it with the effort of just coming to understand politics, because I'm coming from the Men of Dialogue community. Our thing is, as you think, you act. And so if we can improve how you consciously think about politics, you can act better. And so we're often trying to bring you tools that can actually have you more participatory in our political system, because it actually factors more than you may think, even if you don't have a capacity to do this every day. So I'm saying all that to say, I brought my brother Brent on because he's one of the people that personally drives me to make sure I'm more active locally, politically, because of I've watched him be involved in school boards, run for school boards, be on school boards, and politically run for those positions. And he's always saying, be very aware of how politics affects us in so many ways. So because his brother is so astute, he kind of keeps me on my game. And one of the things that he's done in one of our brothers groups chat is highlighted how easy it is in today's time, due to technology, to actually talk to your local, not only your local politician, but your actual congressperson. And so, Brent, if you will, just highlight some of the stuff you've actually been doing, share with people how you're doing it, where they can do it at. We're giving you the floor. We're not, I call this our extra innings, because we kind of just anything over hours, extra innings. So hope I'm not taking too much of your time, but with anything you want to share. But I really want people to hear what you've actually done and some of the interactions you've actually had. So explain it and tell your personal journey in reference to this, because again, I wanted our watchers to hear how they can get involved in a similar way.
Yeah, thank you. And in my past limited political life, as low a level as it has been, you have assisted me in that, and I appreciate it with your platform. And I had a very challenging academic experience when I was in school, in high school, and I noticed when my daughter started to matriculate through school, some of those, she wasn't necessarily, but the kids around her were experiencing some of the same things. And I'm like, here we are 30 some odd years later and having some of the same, nothing has changed. In particular, the participation of minorities in more challenging programs, AP and honors. My daughter would be the only Black person in the class. That was a challenge for me. And I thought I'd get into the academic space in my local community where I can touch the politicians, where I can have breakfast with and coffee with the politicians that are affecting this. Then I said, why can't I do it myself? And that's when I got into two
Nice.
terms of a school board member in the community I lived in, and encourage anybody who has the ability, just even if it's just running, to challenge people, because you get these people, they're in these positions, these low level positions. I say low level, but low and impactful positions for 30 years sometimes. And we have to, if even if they're getting the votes, they're gonna go get them because they go to that church that everybody's gonna vote for them and show up. Challenge them, challenge those thoughts, introduce those ideas that we know we have out here, and be engaged. Go to the school board meetings, and understand that piece of it. I've loved politics all my life. It's my soap opera, and I watch it very closely. Um, and what I understood about us in this connection piece, I talk about it doing at the low impactful level, at the school board and city council level. I've, I've understood that we can't always articulate. We feel like we're not on the level to be able to speak to our state and national representatives. And 5cause.org is what led me to start to push out. It was inspiring to me. And I have no affiliation to 5cause.org. I put it down there. I didn't know it was going to show on the screen like that, like I work for them. I have no affiliation whatsoever, but I knew it was the topic we were talking about. It has it's been enlightening in the sense that um, we all should be, politics and democracy is an action word. You've heard me say that before, Smitty. Democracy is an action word. We can't just go vote. That's not the only action, or there are other actions that can be associated with that um, highlight and illuminate our vote, and that is showing up to these politicians and letting them know what matters, even if they're not the person we voted for. Um, 5cause.org. If you go to 5cause.org, I think it's great. Anywhere you live, you put in your zip code, and it shows the politicians that you can communicate with. It shows, or the politicians that represent you, all the way down to the district level for the national politics. And yeah, so we're just talking the Washington politicians. They'll give you their phone number, their emails, and website, and then it gives you a list of topics to talk about that are currently challenging at the moment, and it does have a left leaning slant. And if you want to call your politician and let them know, they are tallying the people that call in and comment on the different issues that are out there. 5cause.org gives you a probably a five sentence paragraph to say, this is my issue. I have issues with politicians using our state resources for immigration in terms of the National Guard. If that's what you want to talk about, it'll give you a five. If you don't know what to say or how to say it, or you're
Oh
too
wow.
nervous, it gives you
Wow.
a quote, a paragraph of what to say. And
Wow.
so they are tallying these calls, and that's why you might get a voicemail, you might even talk to someone, but say, this is my issue, and that person is putting a tick mark down to say, we are out here and trying to represent and ask you to represent us in the issues that we feel like we're having in our community, whether it's coast to coast or whether it's just mailbox to mailbox. We want you to represent us. Democracy is an action word, so weekly I have been sending out just a reminder that with a 5cause.org on my Facebook page, hey, hit this link, look at it. If there's something that inspires you, reach out to your congressman. And a big part of it is I want to inspire people who we had it was a 48-49 percentage for the presidential vote this last election. We had 20 million people who were registered to vote who did not vote. We had another significant number who weren't even registered to vote. But when I go, and some of these people are in the barbershops that I've gone to all my life, and that's very frustrating. And hopefully I can inspire them and say, hey, yeah, get off the couch and go vote. But at the same time, it doesn't stop at just voting. We need to get out here in these streets.
Yeah, and this is a simple way. And I think I wanted to bring it to the table because from time to time, especially when we have Leo on here, because he's so involved in Georgia state politics, he'll say, "Hey, make sure you're reaching out." And I think this gives an easy way for people to reach out. Or if you're watching the news, for example, and you see a local issue that you really wish you did have more of a voice, and you don't want to feel like, well, I gotta wait to the voting to even vote them out or vote for them or let it be
Exactly.
heard. Here's a simpler way, and you've actually talked to one or two congressmen when you made these calls, right? Like you actually talked to at least one, I think, specific, like directly. If I remember, you actually got the one
So
directly. If I remember.
right, and I think most times you won't get the congressman. You
Right.
will get one of their intern
Right.
representatives, which I think is a cool job for a young 16 to 20-year-old kid to go work for a congressman and answer the phones for him and learn a little about our
Government.
political system here, our democracy, how it works. But I would. I'm from Kentucky. Rand Paul, I got a voicemail from him. Mitch McConnell, I talked to one of his phone representatives, and then McKinley, I think, is my district representative in Congress, one of the 435. I talked to someone there, but McConnell actually a week later, after reviewing what I had commented about with his representative, sent me a letter
Okay. Wow.
responding to saying, "We hear you. This is where I am on the issue." And so when you're talking to a representative, you would call and say, "This is how I feel." Ask the question, how does he feel, your representative feel on the topic, and then lay out where the issues might be. Um, if he continues to vote in a way that might be counter to how you're feeling, just let them know how you feel, how things are impacted in your community, and that you're interested. So they don't think they can just, that's third world country where people are so disconnected from politics that they just don't even go vote anymore. That's not America. That's not who we are. Just like love, democracy is an action word. We got to get out here and make it happen.
Nah, thank you for your time, Brent. Again, just because you've been pushing us, I wanted to get it out to more of the audience than just our chat. So thank you for that. And I hope people are moved to, at a minimum, go look at the website. I think once you look at the website, you will be moved to make one of those calls. And I thought like I said, you didn't talk to one directly, but it still shows you how much they're listening if they take the time to send you a letter back. And at the end of the day, when it comes voting time, that's why they show up in your church. So they
Exactly.
they still care about our one vote, and we keep reminding y'all that every chance we get on Politically Conscious. So thank you for your time, Brent. I'm gonna let you go. Appreciate you, brother. Emil, I'll give you the closing thought. Yep, I'll give you the closing thought for the day.
I'll just tell people, always remind them that if we react emotionally to what we see on the news, we're missing an opportunity to learn what's really going on. So see it, start to study it, get beyond the headlines and look at what's really happening, because a lot of times you're being manipulated very intentionally by a politician to get you to either ignore or support something they want. So my goal, your goal, Montoya, with this show is to get us to think critically. And the way to do that is just ask the question, why am I being shown this today? Why am I being shown this right now? And if you get beyond those headlines, sooner or later, you get to understand you ain't what you said you were, and you're not doing what you said you're doing.
Good stuff. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. Make sure y'all subscribe to the page. If you like the show today, make sure you're sharing. I'm trying to get better at saying that and reminding y'all we need y'all support in that way. If you really love what we're doing, go to mentaldialogue.com. That's the apparatus behind all of this, and become a member of our club, community club. You'll see what we're about. And we basically, it allows us to, pop up throughout our day to be able to bring you this show. Your support makes that happen. So go to mentaldialogue.com and become a supporter of the Mental Dialogue Community Club to keep politically conscious and our other platforms available to you as the public, as we continue to raise the consciousness. See y'all next week as we'll pop up on y'all like we always do. See y'all next week.
Peace.